morning. It's Monday, July 24th, and I haven't been to a theater or a movie since the pandemic started. Now, one of the reasons is I don't see anything that really has been interesting to me in the movies. There's nothing that seems to be exciting enough for me to go. I look at all these premieres and previews and everything, and there's nothing there that gets my blood moving again. It's not like the old days when you looked forward to seeing a particular actor or a group of actors or a comedy team and then wanted to go see them. You know, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, those kinds of movies. And the cowboy movies, right? The cowboy movies, the westerns, they're gone. I don't see anything like westerns anymore. And I'll tell you, some of the stuff that I have seen on TV is just plain awful. Some new movies that have been released in the streaming services, they're just awful. But I want to talk about the American theater. The American theater is in big trouble now. People are not going to the theater anymore. Now, when Gertrude and I started going together, she worked on 51st Street on Park Avenue, and I worked on 47th Street and 5th Avenue. And every Wednesday, we would go to the theater. I'd pick her up after work, and we would go out for dinner, and we would go to the theater. And it was $1.75 to sit in a cheap seat. And we did that all the time that we were dating. We always went to the theater. We loved the theater. Musicals, drama, whatever it was, we went and we saw everything. And this is in 1956, 1957, we were big theater goers. And we remained big theater goers. And we were season ticket holders to Smithtown and to Huntington and to Northport, all the local theaters on Long Island. We contributed to every one of them. And even when I retired almost 20 years ago, we started going to the theater every Wednesday. We would get on the train and we would go to the matinee. And on the way to the theater, we had a lunch in a little sandwich shop on 9th Avenue, and then we would go down to 42nd Street and walk from one theater to the other to see what was playing, and we would go to the theater. We were big theater goers. And now I find out that the American theater is collapsing. So here are some of the facts that I have just recently read. The Public Theater announced this year that the Under the Radar Festival, the most exciting of the experimental theater startups, would be postponed indefinitely and later announced it was laying off 19% of its staff. The Humana Festival of New American Plays, which is a vital launching pad for new great want-to-be playwrights, was canceled this year. And the Williamstown Theater Festival, which is one of our important summer festivals, will only have one fully produced work this year. And it'll have some anemic, some small offerings of readings, just readings, no actual performances. That's a disaster. And this is not in New York all. This is all around the country. Bad things are happening to the theaters. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival, one of the country's oldest and most famous regional theaters, recently announced it had to go to a second round of emergency fundraising to remain operational. Imagine that. 2 rounds of fundraising. And then the Looking Glass, a major anchor of Chicago's theater scene, is halting production this year. And the Brooklyn Academy of Music laid off 13% of its staff. And its Next Wave Festival, which helped catapult, generations of forward-thinking artists to prominence, presented 31 shows in 2017. This year, it will present 7. So the whole theater scene is coming apart right before our very eyes. And nobody's thinking about doing anything about this. The theater has become a very risky endeavor. So right now, the closing of theaters across the country is a permanent shrinking of the possibilities that exist for the American stage. And we in New York are not seeing much of this, as our theater system in New York seems to be a little different than around the country. Because on Broadway, there are many not-for-profit theaters. And non-profit theaters have produced many, many hits recently and have won Pulitzer Prizes. Hamilton, A Strange Loop, all of those things started out in not-for-profit theaters. But it can't continue this way. We can't keep shuttering our theaters and expecting to remain our stage presence great. So something has to be done to keep a vital entertainment section of our universe in business. And it's up to the United States government to step forward and figure out a way to fund this catastrophe out of the gutter. So plain and simple, the American nonprofit theater needs a bailout. So the way this used to work is that most regional and nonprofit theaters were built on a subscription model in which loyal patrons like me and Gertrude paid for a full season of tickets up front, and foundation grants and donations and single ticket sales made up the balance of the budgets. And this worked up until recently because it locked in the audiences and it took the risks out of the theater because they got their money up front. But this system is dying now. The subscriber numbers are falling, and nothing has come to replace that. And we can say a large portion of this is due to the pandemic. Because remember, people stopped going to the theater. People are not getting into crowded places anymore. Many people that I know of do not go to a place where there's more than a few people hanging out. So this has affected it beyond what would normally call some natural attrition or something. So the theater has a big problem because once people start losing sight of it, once people stop going to it, they may never return. And who are these people who used to go to the theater and created a love of the theater within their own families? Like we did. And our daughter graduated from the Yale Drama School because we went to the theater and took them to the theater, and she loved the theater. And she's working in the theater profession now. But all of that is disappearing. So if you don't go to the theater, your kids don't go to the theater, theaters are in trouble. And who has to bail them out? The U.S. government. And is the U.S. government going to be able to find the money to bail them out? I think not. I think the theaters are in deep trouble because if you look down a list of the things that the government has to do, I bet you bailing out theaters is at the bottom of the list. So I think it remains in the hands of the public to step up and start going to the theater again. Theaters are in big trouble. And I leave you with that. Have a great day. Bye.